welcome back to the morning show here on Airlines News, Rufai.
Right, Nigerians on frequent flyer programs of various airlines, domestic or foreign, must be feeling a lot disappointed this morning after the Nigerian government yesterday decided to postpone by 1 week the resumption of activities on international routes which had been scheduled for tomorrow, Saturday, August the 29th, from Lagos and Abuja airports. According to the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, the decision to postpone was for the public good because of the need to ensure that all loose ends are sorted ahead of time. The build-up to the scheduled resumption had overshadowed in large parts by the emerging reality of an aviation industry at the mercy of the coronavirus pandemic and one that is in dire need of institutional support or bailout. But just before the outbreak of the virus, there was a brief altercation between the domestic aviation stakeholders and the federal government over perceived bias in favor of the foreign airlines. With the new date in mind, how prepared are the few Nigerian airlines on the international route for launching out? So joining us now to discuss his thoughts on this is Chris Aligbe, a former aviation industry executive and chief executive officer of Baljune Consult, a consultancy services firm. It's a pleasure to have you to the program. Welcome, Chris. And I'd like to start by saying, what's your take on all of this uncertainty that has lingered for a while in the aviation sector? Now the dates have been pushed forward to about the 5th of September, just 1 week. But anyway, in all honesty and fairness to the task force, he did say from the 29th of August. That was what it said before. Chris?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Yes, the date had to be moved from what the announcement you received because of logistics reasons. It's not fully explained, but the fact of the matter is that a lot of preparations have to be done to ensure that the protocols, ICAO protocols, NCA protocols, and then the committee, the presidential committee, handling the entire issue of the COVID-19 challenges, we were able to, their own protocols will also be followed. And so there are so many protocols that have to be followed, and I think that's what they want to make sure they're going to do. And it's not, again, it's not only Nigeria, When you talk of international flights will be coming from outside the country. And so you will know what is happening from any country where an airline is coming, the conditions there to make sure there's a synergy between our own condition and the conditions you have there. That's only when the flights can be smoothly operated. I think that's what they are looking at. But having said that, yes, we also need to do a lot on our own side. But I'm sure I went to the airport yesterday, and I saw that a lot has been done by Federal Airport Authority of Nigeria. And I also know that the industry at large, particularly the agencies that are in charge of facilitating air travel, whether domestic or international, the regulatory authority, NCAA, and the NAMA, that is the Airspace Management Agency, are there. But the responsibility rests heavily on Federal Airport Authority of Nigeria, and they have done quite a lot, but there are still a few things I'm sure that have to be put in place. And I think that's one reason why, or major reason why, the train is being shifted.
Well, did this shift come as a surprise to you? And do you think that there's some sort of undue pressure to reopen this international flight?
Well, I wouldn't think there's undue pressure. Yes, everybody wants, many people want international operations to start. That's one. And quite some time has been given to prepare for the operations to commence. But like I said to you, you can do everything that you need to do in Nigeria, but then where are the flights coming? You want to know which countries are prepared to operate flights into Nigeria. You want to also see their own conditions. When you see their conditions and there are places you need to adjust, to tweak in order to make sure that everything comes, that everything goes on smoothly together, then you have to take a look at it and do that. But yes, quite some people want to travel, but I don't think that is the major pressure. Because if we are not ready, we are just not ready. And I think that anybody will bring pressure on the government to open up the routes if our country is not ready.
Well, Mr. Aligbe, how about the origin destinations of the airlines that will come to Nigeria? What we've been told by the Minister of Aviation is that Nigeria will apply the principle of reciprocity, which refers to the fact that the EU had included Nigeria among the 15 countries that it barred from having flights into Europe now, or into the EU countries. Now, some Nigerians say that we should be more specific. What's your opinion in that regard, in terms of Nigeria will not allow airlines from these countries to come into the country? And then the protocol in terms of what happens when those airlines arrive in Nigeria. Should Nigeria insist that travelers, passengers from high-risk countries should be compulsorily quarantined on arrival? I know that there's been some talk about tests to be conducted, but shouldn't passengers from high-risk countries be quarantined? And what are your suggestions in terms of the protocols that we are now told will be announced early next week?
Doc, let me tell you this airline operation, international airline operations fall under various diplomatic protocols. And within the diplomatic setting is usually a principle of reciprocity. Normal parlance, we say quid pro quo. If a country says you cannot come for one reason or the other, it means that they also cannot come for that reason. Until they open up to you, you will not open up to them. But like was said the other day, I am surprised that many countries are keeping Nigeria off. Because if you look at our profile on the COVID-19 profile in Nigeria, it is not such that Nigeria should be kept off. But since they decided that that is what it should be, and then we are all responding along that same line. So I think we are right in saying, if we are not going, if you say we can't come to your country, then don't come to our country. That's one. And it's interesting. Yes, Nigerians, a lot of Nigerians travel. But you know how many international operators do we have outside the continent? It's only one. That's Air Peace. And where does Air Peace go to? Air Peace is not even going to UK yet, not going to US yet. And so when you look at it, those are the airlines that make a whole lot of money out of this country. And if they make such money out of this country and they say we should not come, the first and foremost first thing is that they are on the losing side, not even ourselves. But yes, Nigerians want to travel. I'm sure there are various ways. Sometimes Nigerians travel. Those who necessarily must travel, who need to travel. But having said that, again, it is not what one suggests. What does one think? What we are saying is that any country that is coming, what are their protocols? What have they put in place? Will we match what they have put in place with what we have put in place? There are countries, like if you are flying out of Dubai, you are tested before you come. Before you leave, before you go on board the flight, you already get on your testing and the set conditions. If you are coming in, you also tested, and sometimes some countries require you to carry a certificate showing that you've been tested and you are negative. And then when you come into their country, they know whether they are going to test you a second time or they are going to quarantine you. But so these conditions are not just the same. Countries differ in what their protocols are, in what they require. And that's why it's a little bit complex now. Before, you will say, look, these are the standard conditions as set out by either ICAO, which is the apex body in the world that set out some of these protocols, because it works with the WHO, and then IATA. In our country also, we have people who are members of the various subcommittees of IATA, ICAO, and WHO, like a doctor in the doctor in Civil Aviation Authority, Dr. Haggai, is a member of that standing committee. So we know protocols, the standard protocols, but countries have an opportunity to vary their protocols. So we will respond. Nigeria, like every country, will respond to any country vis-a-vis their protocols. That's where the reciprocity principle applies.
Okay, I want to ask you, you went to the airport yesterday, and you said you feel confident in what you see on ground. What did you see on ground?
What I saw on ground is that FAN has done a lot in putting the protocols required in place, the spacing that you require, the testing, the checking of baggages as you come in. They have put in place things to sanitize the baggages before they go. And then you must, as you stand on the line, the spaces are there, at least the social distances required. Social distancing required is already put in place. And then they put every other in place to protect even the person who is processing the air travel passengers. So along the line, they have laid these things out, and they are prepared for themselves where you are going to
along comes the pandemic,
you are going to be checked, your temperature will be checked as you're coming in, where you do your washing of hands, where you get sanitized. They have put a lot of things in place, and I think they have drawn experience from what has happened at the domestic travel. Today, there's not much problem in our domestic travel, except a few that decided they will jump the processes, but they are no longer doing it since 10 warnings had been given at various levels. So they've drawn much of experience from the domestic travel, and that is what we are seeing at the international airports. At least I didn't go to Abuja, but I went to Lagos International Airport, Murtala Mohammed International Airport that I'm talking about, and I'm using that as a basis because for now we're operating only from 2 airports, Lagos and Abuja.
Well, let's talk about the impact of the pandemic on the aviation sector. Before COVID-19, the aviation in Nigeria was already in trouble, and obviously COVID-19 has made it worse. What is the fate of the local carriers, and how best can we, ensure that they can compete, if they can, favorably with the foreign carriers?
Thank you. When we talk about the aviation sector, the tendency for us is everybody to just think about the airlines alone. You take them, there are 2 segments, the subsector, the airline subsector, and the service subsector, which involves the service providers, particularly FAN, NCAA, NAMA, and then you look at the handlers. These are service sector. But the airline subsector that you're talking about, the airlines, yes, they had quite some they're having some difficulties. But they have been coping. They were coping even though they had challenges arising from the environment, that is the operating environment, which is external. But challenges also arising from their internal environment, which is also from their own personal environment, which is internal. So both of them combined made things extremely difficult for them. But they were not flat on the ground. They were still operating. But the COVID-19 impacted not just Nigerian airline operators, but globally. A lot of airlines on ground. Today, all airlines have retired the
Boeing 747.
They're all their 747s. From Qantas, from whatever, they've all retired them because they're now retooling. They're now changing, looking at the aircraft, what they will operate with. And many of them have sacked so many employees have been sacked in various airlines across the entire world. And so Nigeria is not different, even though we had our challenges, but the same thing has happened to us in the airline industry. But if you leave the airline subsector, look at the service provider. Without the airports being in place, the airlines can't operate. Without the airlines, the airports cannot exist. And that is there because both the service providers draw their revenue from the airlines. So the handling companies have nothing to handle, and they can't receive any pay. The fund has nothing to handle because all the charges that come, it will not come to them. The same thing with NCAA, the same thing with NAMA. So both of them are on the ground. And this is the time, that's why we are talking about government to come in to help, not just the airlines, both the airlines and the public sector of the industry. So much is required to put the airports in place. And government policy, that was the fund. This has to be deducted, this has to be deducted, this has to be paid, 25% back to government, TSA, all these things. This is the time not to talk about it at all. This is time to look at what we require to get the industry back. When the industry is back and up and doing, you can start putting policies that, if you're looking at financial policies, what government should take out of one place or the other, you can look at it. But this time, it's time to freeze all those deductions and say, look, what do we do to get the industry back? What do we do to get the airlines back? The airlines need help. If we don't help them, they will be on the ground. If the airlines are on the ground, the service providers will be on the ground. Whether it is FAN, whether it is NAMA, whether it's NCAA, whether it's handling companies, they will all be on the ground. And they will not be in the interest of our country for these to be there. The airline must be, the industry must be kickstarted in order that they will kickstart the economy. If they don't kickstart the airlines and kickstart the industry, the economy will be so heavily impacted and will be dragging. We will fall deeper and deeper into depression.
Well, Mr. Aligbe, I would like you to stay more on this recovery of the aviation sector and what needs to be done. You've given some indications of what can be done. But clearly, what we have seen is that Nigerians ordinarily are very happy that international flights would resume. Many Nigerians who are stranded abroad will be able to find their way home. And also, those who are at home here will be able to probably join their families abroad, those who have not taken the advantage of the evacuation process. One man, in fact, showed great excitement that at last he will be able to reunite with his wife. But beyond the personal side of it, within the aviation industry itself, how much impact in terms of recovery can we get, considering the fact that for now there will just be 4 flights per day in Lagos and Abuja, and there is a ceiling of 1,280 passengers per day. I don't know whether you know how and why the Minister of Aviation is giving that cap in terms of the number of passengers. And, you know, you mentioned FAN, they need to stop deductions. NAMA has had to take loans to be able to pay salaries in the last 2 months. And then you alluded to bailout. But people are concerned about bailout. The last time the federal government tried to help some airlines in Nigeria, we had all kinds of stories about how funds were mismanaged and there was lack of accountability. Should Nigeria take such a risk again, just in an attempt to save an ailing industry?
Thank you very much, Ruben. The fact of the matter, let me make it clear again. We've tried to talk about this over and over again. There was never the bailout they were talking about. That is under the period Sanusi was the governor of Central Bank. That bailout was not directed at the airlines. They were directed at the banks. Yes, the banks, the airlines took loans from the banks and they were managing their loans, their loan portfolio. But when the then governor was going to carry his reform in the banks, some banks complained that they had problems, they were being owed, and that because of that, they are not being able to do what they were required to do. So what the then governor did was to ask them to submit all the portfolios from the airlines, and now he gave them the money directly to bank to clean the books of the banks. That was what he did. He paid and cleaned the books of the bank and said, look, they can now give the airlines some reduced interest on what they were owing. The money was not given to the airline. Yes, there's one airline, one bank, an airline, or whatever, those who did some financial engineering, this is not the time to get into it. But what I'm saying is that precisely that money was meant to clean the books of the banks, not to help the airlines. So let's not get to the point, one airline and one bank did what they did, but that is not a general application on the airlines. So that's one. But the palliatives we are talking about first, grants. We need to see the airlines as part and parcel of the economy. They are contributing a lot in terms of manpower development, manpower employment, contributing a lot to the GDP. And then the collateral effects of the operations, we cannot overemphasize it. So they need to pull them back. If government says they want to create employment, government says do not fire staff. Look, you should understand that these airlines, they are down and they need the assistance of government. We've done that in some certain industries. So why not the airline subsector? But go to the government agencies themselves. They are on the ground. I'm surprised that NAMA should be allowed to go and start looking for loan. NAMA should be assisted because you know the source of NAMA's revenue is the airlines. When the airlines are operating, the overflight charges and all those subcharges, whereas there's no other place they earn their money. FAN, same. Yes, FAN has an IGR portfolio where it makes money, but it would depend on if the airlines are operating. Aeronautical revenues depend on airlines operating, that's landing charges, all those things. Non-aeronautical revenue. If the airlines are not operating, there will not be people at the airport to support the non-aeronautical side of their revenue. So the IGR is at the basal level. And when you see a situation like that, you have to think out of the box. If we don't think out of the box, we will never see the bull by the horn. The earlier we think out of the box and know that these agencies and the airlines need some government assistance, yes, palliative must be there, which are grants. I'm not talking about loans yet. I heard the central bank governor has said, effective January 21, there'll be low interest facility, long-term low interest facility, which the airlines can apply for. But that is January. Between now and January, any airline that collapses, that does not exist, will not benefit from that. So government should come in, no matter what it is, and push at this. It's like you're in a vicious circle. If you're in a vicious circle, you must look at the point where you break this vicious circle. If you don't break it, you remain permanently in vicious circle. That's what we are doing. We must think out of the box, not just looking at the airlines and looking at the industry. The industry is down. It is not the fault of the industry. It is global. Other countries are helping their aviation sector. The airlines, the agencies, whether they are airports, whatever, they are making sure that these things come up again. Even countries where the tourism supports the airlines, the aviation sector, they are making sure that they kickstart tourism, even with all their challenges. Look at what is happening in Spain. Look at what is happening in France. They are focused on their tourism because, apart from what they contribute to the economy, it is a support for the aviation sector. So the aviation sector needs that kind of support. Government should just pull itself up. If it were only the aviation ministry that is in charge and had the money, I'm sure this issue will not be discussing it. But it involves Ministry of Finance, it involves Central Bank, and some other people taking decisions. And the earlier we take these decisions, the better for the country.
Right. What's the best way to resolve all these, challenges in the aviation sector? I mean, the strike. Recently, an airline, sacked a couple of pilots. Pilots have been going back and forth with their airlines. I mean, what's the best way to do all of this?
See, look, we have talked about government seeing the need to help these airlines, but the pilots, the staff themselves, I'm not just a pilot, the staff themselves, should understand they are also, the employer is in a precarious situation. If the employer is not earning money, where is he going to get money to pay them? Look at what in Europe, that happened. But many of the airlines, their pilots, the staff have come to accept, particularly pilots. The pilots are the best paid in the industries. They are taking 70%. They are willing to take 30% cut, 40% cut in order to get back their job. Some others have been laid off look, there are thousands of pilots out of job globally. I'm not saying that that is the best thing, but no airline would have loved to send out their pilots, highly technical personnel, send them away. But since they do not have the money to pay them, what will they do? You only give what you have. And so both the agency, the airlines and the staff, including the agencies, should understand that we are in a precarious situation entirely. Both the workers, both the workforce, and those who have employed them. And that the thing to do is to collectively decide that this is the way to go. Otherwise, your employer will wake up and do what the easier thing to do. Once an employer grounds his aircraft, he sends the pilot away. He doesn't need the pilots. He doesn't need the engineers. What are you keeping them for? When you are the aircraft, what they are going, where you are employing for, the aircraft is grounded. You don't need them. That's what has happened to pilots in Europe. All 747s have been grounded. So pilots that cannot be retuned into other types of aircraft, they're all out of job. That's the situation. That's what the pandemic has done.
You.
And it's just a measure of understanding. We cannot keep grandstanding. The industry should not grandstand. That's the employers, and just wake up without discussing with the staff. The staff also should not grandstand. They should know that we are in it together, and we need to collectively or jointly solve the problems facing us.
Thank you very much.
But government should see these and come in. If you don't want airlines to sack staff, you don't want a fan to sack staff, if you don't want that, come in and help.
Thank you. The point is well made.
That's what we are saying.
Point is well made about government providing palliatives, providing grants to rescue the aviation sector in Nigeria. Thank you very much, Mr. Aligbe. I'm sure there will be another opportunity soon to review the situation of things in the aviation sector after the resumption of international flights.